we have some horrific news out today, which is getting absolutely no attention in the mainstream media. The Guardian reports, quote, "The Koch brothers' political network plans to spend nearly $900 million on the 2016 presidential election." Let's pause there. $900 million. $900 million from the network of two dudes. The two bad Koch brothers who are really involved with politics. Should that be something that's allowed in a democracy? Is anybody really silly enough to believe that the money from these people is not going to affect the politicians that they're giving it to in a way where the politicians are then going to ignore the democratic will of the people that vote for them? If you believe that, you're one of the most naive people on planet Earth. They continue, quote, "Freedom Partners, a group that serves a central role in the political activities of the brothers Charles and David Koch, unveiled its plan to spend $889 million in the upcoming election to donors at an annual meeting in California on Monday. That amount is nearly double what the Koch's network spent in the 2012 presidential election." So, think about the progression that we've had here. I mean, going all the way back to the late 1970s and Buckley versus Vallejo and all the subsequent Supreme Court cases, whether it's Citizens United or McCutcheon, as time has gone by, it's like they were creeping in the wrong direction, and now they just started all out sprinting in the wrong direction. So at first, it was like, okay, money's allowed in the political system, but hey, let's all be aware here that everybody knows that we've essentially legalized bribery and this is corruption and we should kind of hide it and sugarcoat it. And then as time went on, that became less and less the case, and they went, you know what, fuck it. Let's just go out there and brag about the fact that we're buying these politicians. Let's do an announcement about it. Let's have the press report on it. And then, of course, everybody in our terrible mainstream press is going to say what? They're going to be like, oh, what do you mean? That's par for the course with America in our democracy. If you think that that's okay and that's part and parcel of a democracy, you know absolutely nothing about political science. Because when you look at the political science terms and definitions, you find out very quickly that when money has this big of an influence on who gets elected, we're talking about a system that's more like a kleptocracy or a plutocracy or an oligarchy. Or you could say a corporatocracy, or even, according to Mussolini's definition, fascism. Fascism, according to Mussolini, who of course was the fascist leader of Italy, he said it's essentially when you have one main ruler, but also, and probably more importantly, you have the meshing together of corporations and state. That's essentially what's going on here, and this isn't like, you know, code pink, uber liberal nonsense. I'm just going by basic political science 101 definitions here and just explaining the way the system works right now. So naturally, this money will be used for the same stuff it's been used on in the past. They're going to elect people who are against the minimum wage. That's one of their big issues. Why? I have no idea. They're worth literally billions of dollars. But no, they want to make sure that they're people who are making $7.25. You know, no way that we're going to give them $12 an hour, which is a living wage. We want them to continue to work for less than a living wage. Stay classy. They want to abolish the EPA, so they'll push candidates who want to abolish the EPA. They want to get rid of corporate taxes, and of course, they want to give themselves subsidies. So this is what they're doing. They're propping up people who agree with their agenda, even though their agenda on almost every issue is exactly the opposite of what the American people want. But look, I think the bigger issue here to discuss is not just the Koch brothers, because we could beat up on them all day, and honestly, that's easy. But this goes for every single big money donor in the United States of America, and it doesn't matter whether it's from the right or from the left. So sometimes the people on the right point to George Soros, for example. That's the guy that they like to beat up on all the time because he's got a lot of money and he spends it on the elections and yada, yada, yada. I'm willing to make a deal with you guys right now if you want, right-wingers. we stop your team and the Koch brothers from spending all the money on the election cycle, and Sheldon Adelson and Foster Freeze and the rest of those guys, they stop spending money on the election, and our side will stop spending money on the election. Let's do that. Let's all get together and say, okay, nobody's allowed to spend money on this election. No private money in the election cycle. That's the idea of clean elections. That's what I wrote my college thesis on, because it was obvious to me even back then that when you look at governments all around the world, I mean, this is where the problem lies. The problem lies in the government's not representing their people because they're beholden to these interests that pay them, these private interests, these special interests. So I'll make that deal with you, and in all seriousness, they would accept that deal. Your average Joe Republican in Alabama would accept that deal because they don't want big money influencing politics. But the problem is the establishment in both parties. The establishment Democrats and the establishment Republicans, they thrive off of this system of big money. I mean, you think Harry Reid or Chuck Grassley, you think that they're dynamic enough to win an election based off of ideas if they're not propped up by the corporate class and by the elite? They wouldn't win. So they're going to try to keep this system in place. And by the way, whenever the Democrats try to fight the issue of money in politics, they're really not doing that. You have to be aware of this because it's actually very nefarious. So there was an amendment that the Democrats brought up recently, which they said would address the issue of money in politics. It wouldn't, because if you read the details of it, all it did was repeal Citizens United. So in other words, they said, okay, we will be allowed to regulate the issue of money in politics through Congress if we choose. They're not going to say, they didn't say that they're going to do it. So notice, they're trying to cut the legs off of movements like the Wolfpack Amendment and other movements that really try to get money out of politics for good. So they're not on our side that much either. Let's keep that in mind here. So for example, I have some numbers for you. Harry Reid, how much money has he taken in his political career? $45,241,401. Who's he going to listen to? The people that gave him that money? Mostly establishment interests, or is he going to listen to your average voter in Nevada? John Boehner, throughout his career, $65,761,042. Wow. How about Mitch McConnell? $66,875,406. How about Romney in the last election cycle alone in 2012? $446,135,997. And in case anybody thinks I'm going to beat it up more on the right here, think again, because President Obama in his political career has taken how much money from establishment interests and Wall Street interests and corporations? $1,534,380,458. So our president, our so-called liberal Democratic president, has taken over $1.5 billion in campaign contributions, and we're supposed to believe that he's going to listen to a grandmother in Tuscaloosa, Alabama with her concerns. No, his primary concern is the rich and the elite and Wall Street and the establishment and the multinational corporations and the people who gave him most of that money. Of course, the Democrats, every once in a while, they'll throw a bone to your average voter, because that's what the Democrats are. A little bit better than the Republicans. But that's not enough. I'm tired of picking between the lesser of two evils. The answer is to get the money out of the system and do it ASAP.